Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dan McDermott. This is the McDermott Report, streaming live every weeknight at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Joining me is Emily Williams on the line. Emily, how you doing?
Great, Dan. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's our standard opening line. All right, we got a good show tonight. We're going to talk about a Saudi prince. We're going to talk in praising terms, but I disagree with him on something. Ron Paul, and at some point in the show, we're going to talk about the gold standards, a true ratings bonanza, and the debt ceiling peeing contest that's going on in the district. Who's winning? What would happen really if this doesn't go well, etc. to the average working guy? But anyway, it's interesting news day, Emily. What caught your eye today? Anything?
Well, I know that we've been following the Murdoch story pretty closely, and it looks like News Corp is having some problems again, naming the family members of the victims of 9/11 are pursuing an investigation to see if News of the World actually attempted to hack their loved ones' phones. And this is, of course, coming up right near the 10-year anniversary of the tragedy. So more bad news for Rupert Murdoch.
I know you're a big fan. That's a rhetorical...
Well, yeah. I mean, this just keeps getting messier and messier, and it's probably a really good thing that he closed the tabloid at this point.
Well, it's interesting. Okay,
again.
Aren't you interested in the fact that Rupert Murdoch? The reason I'm looking over here is I'm trying to steal her picture to stick up on the screen. That's a whole thing. I got to tell you my YouTube story, but yeah, isn't it interesting that it doesn't seem that it is impacting his U.S. properties. The News Corp, he's the biggest. The Murdoch family is the biggest shareholder in News Corporation, followed by a Saudi prince. But isn't it interesting? It doesn't. I mean, there's not shame at the Wall Street Journal or the way that all the UK tabloids are being impacted by this. Do you find that odd?
Yes and no. I mean, there's always been a disconnect between Murdoch's holdings in the States and in the UK. No one's been able to really... I mean, the argument that Murdoch is just a tabloid owner never went over well here. So I think that we might see more of an effect now that the 9/11 issue is coming into play. But if anyone is good at spinning it, it will be Murdoch. So.
Do you think that's a thing? I mean, do you think that it was UK reporters? I was talking with Roger Bianchini from Warren County Report today about this. Do you think it was UK reporters hacking in, which would be easy to do from the United Kingdom, in this day and age, even in 10 years ago almost? Or do you think it was the U.S. properties?
Well, they were saying that it was a reporter. The initial report that came out about this was that the News of the World had approached I believe he was a police officer, about obtaining those phone records, and he said no. And that was definitely the News of the World. So I think that it's likely to say that this was all within that one publication. But it's quite possible that it was larger than that.
Yeah, because I think that's interesting that it doesn't seem to have impacted the U.S. properties. I was watching NPR. I was listening to NPR today in the car on the way to the gym, and I was listening to an interview with Prince. I can't remember his name. He's the rich Saudi prince.
He's the rich Saudi prince.
Oh wow! What's the? Oh, you just went onto UStream and we're getting an echo.
Yeah, the volume just came up.
Busted. Anyway, so I'm listening to this guy, and as a Prince I forget the guy's name. I'm sorry, but he was actually on a show, on the radio show I used to do. It was a recorded thing, and he did he was an interview, but it was pre-recorded. Anyway, what he said was, he said we got to get to the bottom of this, and he says I try to be ethical in all of my business dealings, and we need to. And I'm like, a Saudi prince. Do you find any kind of contradiction in a Saudi prince talking about ethics, a representative of the Saudi regime? Does that strike you as a red flag of any kind? I mean, being a woman, maybe?
Well, I think that, I guess. I mean, I think that I don't know who exactly the prince was, and I couldn't speak towards his ethical background, so I'd hate to make a generalization there.
I'm not, and again, as a disclaimer, I'm not saying in his business dealings he isn't the most ethical guy in the world. I don't. But I'm just saying, a representative of the Saudi. First of all, where'd he get his money? Okay, he's obviously a smart business guy because he's super rich, and he is the second largest shareholder, or his company is whatever in News Corporation, and I don't know. I mean, this is not a great government, you know. If you look at the diplomatic cables and history that have the WikiLeaks stuff, which no one disputes the accuracy of, they just get mad that it was released. But I mean, they just, my God, there's the people are killed, beaten. If you're a woman, I guess if I want to divorce you, what do I say it 3 times? And you're penniless, destitute, no rights to the kids, nothing. Not that we're married, but
yeah. But looking at him as only an investor, from that light, I can see why you'd be very angry and frustrated with the whole situation. I mean, you got to think about the fact that journalism in the United States is upheld at a really high standard, and if you're investing in a group that obviously the owner was not own properties that weren't living up to a high standard of journalism, you got to wonder whether or not your money is safe. So I'm sure that that's in part what he's talking about there. I'm sure it's all coming from a money perspective, and it's not all completely ethical. So
I can't believe you would impugn the reputation of a member of the Saudi. I don't know. I'm gonna get in trouble. All right, I have a ghetto shot. I think this works. That's pretty ghetto. Anyway, okay, so now that I've upset the Saudis and everyone else, I was doing show prep today. I want to talk a quick technical topic. I don't know if you know this. I mean, do you have any apps on your phone? I think I have a BlackBerry. Your phone is actually more ghetto than mine, right?
Yes.
So I'm on my phone and I'm looking at Reuters and ZDNet so I can aggregate for my show. And anyway, so I'm looking at stuff and I find this interesting story that I want to talk about. This notion of cursive writing in the schools. I saw it on ZDNet, and then I wanted to read it again online. So I go to the ZDNet.com. I can't find the story. And I've just noticed that these apps, even on a BlackBerry, and it's not the platform of choice for app developers, but all these things, I think Handmark makes a lot of them, and they're good. But it's easier to read stuff on your phone than when you go to the actual website. Doesn't that seem odd that it should be the opposite? I mean, it's like I go to Reuters.com, and as soon as I go there, I see world business. Under world, I see top news, world politics, sports, technology, environment, entertainment, odd news, health, and it's just nice length stories right there with one picture and a couple ads in there. So tiny you can't really read them. They're not making any revenue from this versus what they're making on the web, and I'm surprised that. Do you see that? I mean.
I think that there are some sites, and I don't have any apps for news reading on my phone. I do all of it directly through a mobile web browser. So I don't have as much experience with the apps that you're talking about, but I think it's interesting when companies make the decision to invest more in the mobile side of their product than the broader internet side of their product. And I'm not sure if that is a smart decision. I mean, we saw smartphones definitely completely commandeered the market for mobile internet technology for a while, but now with tablets gaining speed and other sources, I think that companies are going to have to really focus on their larger internet product as well.
Yeah, but the money's still not there. I did some checking because I want to tell you about this YouTube thing, and then I want to get into the cursive thing, which this is going to be one of my rants tonight. Let me write this. Let me write in cursive on my notes here. But yeah, I did the math. As our regular watchers or viewers, listeners know, I publish 3 newspapers. For every $10,000 we do in print advertising, we do $20 in online. In other words, our revenue from online is $20 from the net, from like Google ads and stuff, to 10 grand in print. Now the cost, it's, you know, to print my papers is like 6 figures, right? But it's all my web stuff together is $700 a year versus 6 figures. So the costs are dramatically different. But and that gap will change, but there's just not the money. That's the big. That's one of the fears, and I know you could talk about this for hours. It's one of the concerns I have. If you look at all these stories about that are on these different sites, almost all of them start from a newspaper or a magazine, some sort of printed product, because those are the only vehicles historically that have generated the revenue. There are exceptions like 60 Minutes, which is a world-class broadcast, and I love it. But in general, the print guys and gals, in your case, you have a master's degree in journalism and you're an excellent writer, but that's where this stuff starts from. Everything on the radio and your local TV stuff, it all comes, a lot of it comes originally from print. Am I wrong?
No, that's completely true. And the problem really is just for print, the biggest hurdle going into the future is just going to be monetizing the internet, which of course no one's figured out. So it's really almost the holy grail of newspaper right now is trying to figure out how to get people to buy your content. And, you know, I've always thought that going an iTunes route and having people pay per article is a good idea. But the New York Times just started a new subscription service, so we'll see how that goes. It's going to take trial and error, I think, unless, you know, some young kid comes up with the next brilliant idea on how to sell newspapers online.
Well, the last one was Rupert Murdoch. When's the last time you heard someone talk about the Daily? That was his new generation, you know, end-all, get-all, online, iPad-only newspaper. I think I have one friend who got it immediately. He's one of these guys, you know, Fox News, morning news, you know, noon and night. And I like it all. I like Fox, I like MSNBC, I like NPR, that Al Jazeera thing, and all that. I watch it all once in a while, especially when something's blowing up overseas. You got to look at Al Jazeera because they got people on the ground. But yeah, I just that hasn't gone anywhere. Do you know anybody? I mean, you ever seen anybody reading it? The Daily, the News Corporation iPad-only newspaper?
No.
Oh.
I mean, but yeah, it's tricky, and I think that you have a great point in that a lot of the original content does stem from print. But I also think that's a good word to newspapers, that they really need to start focusing on the hard-hitting investigative stories. I mean, those are the big stories that are going to keep print having a name. And when I say print, I mean, in the traditional sense, of course, it means you actually physically print it on paper, but I think that writing decent copy and putting it online is just the logical, you know, forward step for print newspapers. I think writing content for online that's long form is exactly the same medium. Of course, you have different deadlines, and you're working with, you know, a completely different culture as far as newspapers go when you're putting stuff online. But I think that it's really important that we start equating print with the internet. I think that there needs to be less of a disconnect there.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're doing this. We're trying to figure, you know, and we're making, you know, a couple bucks a month. Nah, that's sarcastic. But speaking of revenue, I got this thing from YouTube saying it's okay. There's 3 ways you can make money on YouTube. Well, 4. I guess you could scam people, but you can. They send you an email if one of your videos is hot. Like I had a video of the Blue Angels the day before the head of it, or they flew too low and the head of it, quote unquote, voluntarily resigned a couple of days later, and it was a national news story. And I happened to be there, and I was actually in the Fat Albert plane the day that they flew too low. I was in the show with the press, and so I had this video, and it just went crazy, nuts. So I got this email from YouTube saying, would you like to enable revenue sharing on this video? So I was like, sure, and it's gotten, I don't know, thousands, I don't know how many, but and I've had some that are like 16, 20,000 or whatever, and then others 50, but they grow. Anyway, then there's the partnership program that's where you'll see like Fred and these guys, and they can brand their channel better. They can choose their thumbnails, because some of the thumbnails for this show, I look like Saddam Hussein's dead sons. I mean, only a mortician could love it. I look really bad, but I don't care. You always look good. So you, as your Germanic fans will attest. And anyway, there's this thing in between now where they sent me that today, that they'll turn revenue sharing for all your videos, right? And so I said, okay, sure. But you can't, but then they question you, like, do you have any photographs of any kind? And like I have your picture, which I basically stole from your Google Plus page. But then they review it, right? And then I don't know, it's like there's all these rules, like you can't it says you can't have advertising in it. What does that mean? Like if we're the McLaughlin Group, and you say, this program, McLaughlin Group is brought to you by Geico, or Archer Daniels Midland used to do Brinkley, or is that allowed? Like a sponsorship mentioned at the beginning, if it's a broadcast program, surely they wouldn't not want the McLaughlin Group on YouTube. It's a great show that my local PBS affiliate, WBAR, regularly, or BRA, whatever it is, Blue Ridge, whatever it is, they regularly preempt for their endless loop of infomercials. Yeah, I'm trying to figure all that out. I'm not sure how to do that, because ideally we'd have a couple pennies at some point, and if Geico wants me to hold a lizard up and urge you to call Geico, and I'll buy their insurance and hawk their product, I guess, like Paul Harvey used to do. I don't know, but that's a whole thing. Do you have a YouTube account?
I do.
Do you have revenue? You're probably jealous.
Yeah, well, my YouTube account has like 3 videos on it, all of which I used in different blogs. So I really just use it as a place to store things, I guess. I don't actually use YouTube to get people to watch my stuff. So,
of course, soon we'll have we're working on another show. Can I say what the topic's going to be? Maybe?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Emily has a food blog. What's your food blog URL, or is it public, I guess?
Yep, it's a Food Hoard, and Hoard is spelled Hoard.
Important to clarify.
Yeah. Foodhoard.blogspot.com.
With the D.
And I just caution that it hasn't been updated in a while, but it does contain some really nice pictures, I think. Some nice photos and some nice recipes. So it's kind of it's a collection of like techniques I've come across and recipes I've come up with. So hopefully we'll be able to transition that into some sort of a show so that we can break up the monotony of the national news every once in a while on the McDermott Report.
Are you suggesting we're monotonous? No, I was telling Emily today, we were talking, I'm trying to get her to do it because I know if she's interested in something, she'll be even better at it than she already is. Great. But I was watching, I don't know, one of those specials on the Food Network, and they're terrific. And when they started out, it was apparently really ghetto. And they had like food news and food talk. They didn't actually have a kitchen. And then I saw Mario Batali was talking about it, and he said they finally got a kitchen, but it wasn't hooked up. It was like you might as well have gone into Lowe's, and just set up shop and brought a camera. And so, they would prepare stuff, but they couldn't actually cook anything. And then at one point he was like kicking his knee under the thing to make it sound like he was shutting the oven door and pulling out the done one, like they used to do on daytime talk shows and stuff. But now it's blown into this big thing, and these guys are, heroes. If Bobby Flay walked into a restaurant, it'd be mobbed like a movie star. And they have their own brands. They have their own line of incredibly overpriced products at Kohl's, and so good for them. If they can get $80 for a spatula. That was sarcastic for dramatic effect, but I don't know. So anyway, anyway. So hopefully we're gonna get Chara sneaking up on me with coffee. I feel like the Saudi prince. I have this woman, this nice young lady, bringing me coffee. That was a dig. Just no, she's a sweetheart.
Looking to take everyone off tonight.
I know. I've upset everybody. Okay. I want to talk about the cursive thing, and I wouldn't mind. Chara, do me a favor. Why don't you go back? Ooh, don't. Thanks. Why don't you go back and get on the phone and talk to us about the cursive thing? Chara's our call screener. Don't forget to turn the thing off when you put the pot back. Thank you. I'm just glued to this chair. That's why she does it. I would do it for her if she were in the same situation. But yeah, Chara, go ahead and click yourself in when you're ready. And I just want to get your opinion on this because you just graduated high school and you're going to college. So anyway, okay, Emily, I was reading this thing. Here I am aggregating again. I was looking on my BlackBerry in my nice little app for ZDNet. And it's had this story that I guess the state of Indiana is going to allow schools to not teach cursive writing. Keyboarding is the wave of the future. So I don't know. I'm not thrilled about this. I mean, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, where I stand on this is I did have cursive, I think in second or third grade in elementary school, and it was taught for that one unit or what have you, and then completely just wasn't used again. And in my day-to-day life, and I'm a journalist and I take notes on paper, but I take notes in block print. I mean, I don't use cursive except for to sign my name. So like I was telling Dan earlier, if I were to go back and be in elementary school again and have the option of either taking a keyboarding course, which I actually never took a typing course in my entire education, or learning cursive, I would definitely choose keyboarding. I think that the skill is just something that is applicable to just about any job you get nowadays. And cursive is just, while you can argue for the merits of penmanship, you can teach penmanship without teaching cursive, I guess. So as long as kids still know how to sign their names, which, signing your name is different from basic cursive anyway, I think that this is a fine idea, and I'd support it if I were in Indiana.
Boy, that's...
Which state?
All right, All right, let's bring Chara in. I'm going to try to bring her in. Chara, are you there?
Yep.
All right.
Hello.
Emily. Hey, okay, Chara's our wonderful call screener. Emily is saying we should replace all the pens with keyboard. No, I'm just kidding. But what do you...
No.
Are you having a dispute there?
No. If given
now
the
I got
choice,
the screener on there. I'm going to bring this caller in a sec. But hang on, caller from 253 area code. I'll get you in a sec. But yeah, okay. What do you think? Not making little kids learn how to write cursive.
Well, I never learned how to write cursive very well. I can probably write my name, like only my first name, but that's about it. I would support it. I do not like cursive at all. I can't write it. And cursive sucks.
All right, let me bring this other caller.
Pretty much all I got to say.
All right, caller from 253 area code, welcome. What do you think? Should we get rid of cursive handwriting in school?
I don't know. Who said it sucks?
Well, she didn't say that. She just said if you have to choose between cursive and keyboards, it makes more sense. That they should still have to write, but they don't necessarily have to have a whole course in how to learn cursive, which I guess would be at a really young grade, right? Like preschool, first grade or something?
Yeah, I think first or second grade is when they do it.
Ah, I think I know who this
At least
is.
when I learned it. But, at about the 4th or 5th grade or 6th grade or somewhere, I switched to printing, even though I learned how to do cursive. And I never really went back to cursive, and now I wish I could kind of go back, and I occasionally will practice my cursive handwriting, just because I'd like to have a nice, my dad used to have a nice sort of a Spencerian, cursive handwriting that he learned back in the Catholic schools back in the 30s and 40s, and I wish I had that kind of handwriting.
Man, my dad, exact same thing. And the nurse, if you got it wrong, she'd beat you in the wrist or the knuckles. They get you right here. But my dad writes like a calligrapher. It's amazing.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, and he went to Catholic school. He's still deathly afraid of nuns to this day. But, I mean, they taught him how to write, you know.
But
so I think...
them,
go ahead.
I assume they're going to teach them printing, but they'll be able to get by with that. But if they don't teach any type of handwriting, what happens if they need to write something down and they don't have a keyboard? Wasn't Emily saying that she never took keyboarding, which I'm sure she can keyboard, but she takes her notes by hand. So what do you do if you don't have a keyboard nearby and you've got to take notes and you've never had handwriting? I suppose they'll teach them printing.
I
go ahead, Emily.
That there are still going to be penmanship. I assume there's still going to be a unit on penmanship, and that's something that you learn before you learn cursive anyway. So,
right.
I mean, or at least where I went to school, it was a completely separate unit. So, and there are, I mean, even in just speaking purely in academics, I mean, there's definitely fields where you still need to do things by hand, like math, for example. And I'm sure that there are still people that write essays in blue books out there. At least I hope there are. But, as long as I think that I understand where you're coming from, wanting to keep up with your cursive and wishing that you had that handwriting. But at this point in time, I think that cursive is more of a hobby and less of a necessity. So if you're talking about kids' education and, preparing for the future and preparing for the job market, I definitely think that typing is a much more necessary skill.
Yeah, I think you're right, but it kind of this topic kind of blends in, I think, with another thing I read today. It talked about memory and the fact that I don't know if you saw that story. Some study came out today, and they were doing some research. Does the fact that so much information can be Googled and instantly at your fingertips, is that affecting people's ability to remember and their need to remember things? And
that's the key point, though. Article? That's the key point. It used to be my dad would say, we're about the same age, right, Glenn? I'm 43. You're probably close to that, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So our dad would say, look it up in the encyclopedia. Well, if you're on the computer now writing, and now it's all in the cloud, if you have access to your cloud, your hackable cloud, then obviously you would have access to Wikipedia to look it up and get, the Earth is whatever. I mean, not to judge the accuracy of it, but I like it. I use it a lot. But yeah, is it necessary to learn all that stuff? Einstein didn't know his phone number, and he said, "Why should I commit to memory something I can look up in a phone book?" Who's going to argue with him?
Yes, that was right. That apocryphal story was right on the tip of my tongue. I was going to mention that, but and a lot of this information, on the one hand, why store it in your brain if you really don't need to have it on a day-to-day basis, and you can look it up easily like that? But then, on the other hand, is there actually something in the process of memory, if we're not memorizing other things to take its place? Is the process of memorizing is it like a muscle? We're not using it, and so the very act of being able to remember is that ability is diminishing as a result.
Mine has never been all that. No. Am I allowed to say your name?
I'm going to jump in just because I think I disagree
a
little bit.
Go ahead.
And granted, I'm talking from a different generation than both of you. And I'm actually I think I'm in a unique generation in that I grew up, and part of my education was not computer dependent. I mean, there weren't computers in the classrooms when I was going through elementary school, and I don't even think we got the internet in my home until I was, at least in my teens. So I think that there's a point to be made about not memorizing things. I think that cell phones have made us not have to memorize phone numbers anymore, which can be dangerous. But as far as blaming a loss of memory on Wikipedia or just Googling things is concerned, I mean, I'd say that, yes, you don't have to know all that information, but I'd also argue that Wikipedia and Google have taught me things that I would elsewise never have learned. That I know a lot of, and I guess it's probably trivial information, but some of it is history that I've learned from the internet that, if I had to go to a library, I probably wouldn't have looked it up. So, there's a give and take there. I think that there is still a lot of learning involved.
So
hey, let me wait real quick. Caller 253, am I allowed to say your name?
Sure.
Okay, and can I put your picture up? This is Glenn, my buddy of 20 years. Can I put your picture up in Google Plus?
Wait, where's my... Wait, where did you get my picture?
I'm going to steal it from Google Plus in violation of YouTube's... am I allowed?
Do you want to lose viewers?
No, they want to know who they're talking
stick it
to.
up.
Is that okay? All right, go ahead. Emily or Chara?
Stick it up.
Whoever, I guess you were going to defend your honor against whatever. No, I'm kidding.
Whoever. I was going to say, yeah, you can, as long as you don't tell any stories from the old days. From the old days, Dan.
No problem. No problem. I got your back.
I've got a few stories on you, Dan, but I'll save your reputation.
Indeed.
I'm just kidding. But what Emily is saying, though, I think it sounds to me like not only is she, the very fact that she's learning it tells me that she's remembering it. So her memory is still learning things, and
all right, I'm gonna we have a, I don't know if we've lost. Are you okay with your audio there?
Me?
Yeah. Okay. You're back. You're good.
Glenn,
go ahead.
Did you miss the brilliant point I just made?
I did. Make the brilliant point one more time for us.
I heard you.
I think Emily got it, and she doesn't think it was so brilliant. So go ahead, Emily.
No. I think that I think that you're dead on. The problem when studies or when reports like this come out is that it tends to make people think in definites rather than, and most of the world is not black and white. I mean, this is obviously, there's something to be said for a lack of memory loss, or losing the ability to remember things based on having instant access to knowledge at all times. But at the same time, you really have to take into account that when you read something, it's not like you do retain things still. The human mind hasn't changed. These kids that are getting, this onslaught of information all the time are still retaining things. I think it would be hard to argue that they weren't. Of course, there's things that you don't have to remember. My favorite example of this on the internet is IMDb, the Internet Movie Database. And I think it's made it so people just don't have to remember, actresses' names anymore, or you don't have to have this complete knowledge of who's in what movie, because you have an instant encyclopedia at your fingertips. So I think it's a combination, and I don't think that you can argue definitely either way.
Yeah, as you were talking about that, though, remembering actresses and things like that, it makes me wonder though if. And I agree that with the internet, you don't have to remember all this information because there's so much of it you can look at. But I wonder if we lose a little bit of context by not having that information in our heads when we're having a conversation. If we lose certain historical, cultural context, I find that in dealing with younger people, that they don't seem to have beyond just their own life, adulthood. They don't seem to have much of a cultural context or a historical context and maybe that's because they're not memorizing some of these things. What do you think?
Well, I think that I'd have to argue exactly the opposite. I think that because of the internet, there are broader cultural things that I would have never or I guess cultural references that I would have never understood. And the best example that's coming into my head right now is the the Where's the Beef Lady, which was a commercial that aired before I was cognizant enough to know what was going on and remember it. And it's a reference that's made, I mean, you know, it's one of those references that I think has been kept alive by the fact that, you know, people my age and younger can hop on YouTube and watch the old commercials and go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what kids you're talking to, but I know that if anything, being able to Google something on your phone in, you know, a social situation adds to conversation in my circles. I mean, you don't have a bunch of people sitting around going, you know, oh my goodness, who is that person in that movie? Or, you know, where is this place I'm thinking of? And, you know, it's a much more, it's just a very, it's organic. It becomes organic to conversation once you're used to it. So. Yeah,
and we don't, and I'm not saying like either Google and internet or just remember things. I'm saying both, because I do the same thing. It's like we'll be sitting around and sometimes we can remember stuff, but other times it's like, oh, who was that? Who was that actor? And we'll say Google it. It's not like I'm opposed to doing that. I'm just wondering if, and they found in this study today about the memory thing, I think if I read it correctly, they found that people, when they did these tests, if they thought that the information was going to be recorded and available to them at another time, they, as you might expect, had less retention of that information when they were tested later. So I'm wondering if people, if they figure, you know, at any time I could probably look up whatever I need to know, so they're not really, they don't have that storehouse in their mind, and so when they come to a conversation, they can't instantly pull from that unless they're prompted by a question or something, where then they can go out and Google it and find an answer. But in that sense, it's more of just a factual piece of information they're getting, bringing back into the conversation, as opposed to a broader context that they've sort of got in their mind, and the different interrelationships between, you know, maybe a cultural and a historical thing. And do you see what I'm saying? Or Dan?
Yeah, and I'd say that this is probably the point at which academics needs to step in. I mean, those are all skills that kids and young adults should be learning in school. That there still needs to be books, and there needs to be, you know, intelligent discussion over things that you had, you know, absorbed previously and then brought to the table. And I think that, you know, with that together, and I mean, unless teachers nowadays are just going to the internet with their students, which, I mean, I'm not sure because it's been a while since I've been in public school, but I think there isn't, that people shouldn't be worried that memory is going away. As long as we have a society that's based on education, it should be all right.
They probably had the same thing with videos when teachers first would show a video instead of just talking about the book, you know, or play an audio recording. I'm sure every time there's a new technology, guys like me worry about, you know, the impact, but I don't want to be Paul Bunyan either and deny the existence of the chainsaw and insist that we should all just hack wood, you know.
John Henry.
Hey, you know. Okay,
Emily's going to Google John Henry.
I'm sure
no,
she's
I know exactly who that is.
As she quickly types. She's fast. She's a wiki.
I was a cultural history major. So
oh, great.
I'm all set on that.
All right, let me bring up another thing that either you guys can talk about. We got to do our Ron Paul thing. It's great for you get 1 million views.
Hey, did you tell Emily she has to disagree with me on everything?
No, but devil's advocate in moderation, you know.
Okay.
All right. All right, so Ron Paul was in the news talking about, first of all, he's got an ad about and I guess we can talk about the debt ceiling update, the urinating contest that's going on in D.C. And Ron Paul's got a new ad that I think he's doing $600,000 buy or something. It's the biggest spend of the campaign so far. Pardon that I was aggregating there or rewriting whatever. But and then he had this little exchange with Tim Geithner, and they got into is gold money, and Tim Geithner said, or I'm sorry, Fed Reserve Ben Bernanke, Federal Reserve chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, and he said no, it's not money, it's an asset. And he said, yeah, and he pointed out, he said, well, like Treasury securities are an asset, but they're not really money, currency. But really, the larger thing is Ron Paul is no fan. I like Ron Paul a lot. I think he's a very fascinating guy to watch, and I agree with him on a lot of stuff. Like, I don't think you should throw, like, legalizing drugs. Like, if some hippie goes in the woods and smokes a joint, I don't think it's anybody's business. But I don't think a pregnant woman should shoot heroin, right? So I'm not sure where you draw the line in between. But we're spending all this money jailing these 19-year-olds, giving them criminal records because they smoke a plant. I just think it's ridiculous. But he wants to go back to the gold standard, and he's not a big fan of the Federal Reserve. He likes that about as much as Emily's likes Rupert Murdoch. But so I posted this video up, and there was an interesting tip for tat. And I guess the thing, as far as is gold money being currency, that could be, and I actually looked it up on Wikipedia. And I accepted because I was trying to confirm what I thought. Basically, currency, there's like legal tender. Well, that term typically applies to what is legal to pay government debt with. But there's all sorts of currency. Currency, money, is whatever works in that thing. Like, you could have a video game arcade that takes tokens. Well, that's not legal tender for as far as the government's concerned, but inside the mall video arcade, your token is currency. It's money. You could have an account. A friend of mine his ex-girlfriend is in prison, and she has. I talked to her, and she has an account in it's all on paper where she buys her stuff from the canteen or whatever, and there's no money, but like that account you could even argue is currency. So on that thing, but I'm concerned. Let's talk about the gold standard. The whole notion, for a long time, people used gold or silver coins, but then it was all of a sudden it was $1.50 worth of gold and $1 coin. And so, how do you deal with that? And clearly, our current situation, where the U.S. money is based on the full faith and credit of the United States, is not a good. Not a good thing to advocate this week, as the full faith and credit of the United States is being questioned and debated in these negotiations. But I'm not all up on the gold standard, because gold, it doesn't fluctuate wildly, but it does fluctuate, and it's risen tremendously as we've been in this recession and a disposable income depression, I say. But I just think it's kind of like oil, in that if you adopt a gold standard, then your gold reserves can fluctuate, and you have no control of it. You can't tame it. You can't really influence it. It'd be like if it was on the oil standard, and we had a bunch of oil. I've seen oil at 79 cents, and I've seen it at $4. What do you guys think? Emily first.
Well,
if you cared, is this boring, or do you have an opinion on this? I can go to Glenn.
I don't even know where to start on this. I do. I think that the idea of even thinking about returning to the gold standard is just ridiculous. And I mean, it's all right to talk about it in an academic sense, or an academic economist talking about it, but in reality, even putting it on the table is just, I don't know. it's not okay with me. And I think that Ron Paul is an interesting guy, and it'll be interesting to see if he actually does anything in the election.
Well, he's looking good right this week. Yeah, he's gonna do well. Bachmann's gonna win Iowa, but she's not going to get a huge bump out of it because she was born there, and it's assumed that she's going to win Iowa. She's not going to get like an Obama Iowa bump, where all of a sudden, he was really the thing that everyone talked about. And what I noticed was he was surrounded by a bunch of white supporters, and it told folks who were questioning whether, we went from the first Catholic, the first African American. Hillary was almost the first woman nominee and woman president in that year. I think whoever the Democratic nominee was, was theirs to lose. And then all of a sudden you saw him in a largely white area with this tremendous support, and that's when people really took him seriously and said, this guy can actually go the distance, he can win. And he's just another. I think at that point he became just another candidate instead of the African American candidate that night, if I'm allowed to say that. Glenn, what do you think? Should we dump the full faith and credit approach and put a bunch of gold and beef up the Fort Knox security situation down there?
Hang on just a second. I got one more paragraph to go in this Wikipedia article on the gold standard. So Emily, why don't you want to go back to a gold standard? What's your objection to it?
It just, I mean, if we look, and this is going to be, well, we're just talking about memory, and of course I'm lacking my memory now. But the reasons, if I remember correctly, the reasons for leaving the gold standard were, it was specifically because of lower and lower middle class families and farmers in particular, I think, that were having trouble, coming out from underneath their debts as a result of the gold standard. And that was part of the reason why we switched initially. So if I'm wrong, please correct me. But if that's the case, and we're already struggling with debt, I'm not sure that flooding the market with a different currency is going to change that. And I'm going to be really honest and say that economics is probably one of my weaker fields. But that would be my 2 cents on it.
Okay. Well, I'm not an expert on it, Dan, and I don't. I think the more I speak on it, the more I would show my ignorance. But I don't think
it's it's not a topic I'm well versed in. I just know he's talking about it, and I did some thinking about it. And I think you would be. I mean, the whole concept is we used to actually have gold. You've probably seen them. An old dollar. It said, this is backed by $1 worth of silver. Before that, it was gold held by the U.S. government, and there was actually somewhere allegedly stored silver. So whenever this was just a paper representation of the silver back in Fort Knox or wherever, and then because of wild fluctuations in the value of gold, and for other reasons, probably so they could just print it, they decided that instead of that, they're just going to say, you know what, we're a powerful country, influential. We buy everybody's stuff, and we're just going to say this is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States, and that's it. And then now the Federal Reserve can, influence things, and they're more transparent now. But Ron Paul's been against them for a long time, and I don't really understand it either. Go ahead, Glenn, and then we'll move on to the
I think
the
part
debt
of the problem
ceiling.
is when you have a gold standard, you've got a standard, and you can only print money. You can only print currency, paper money, in direct relationship to the amount of gold or whatever the precious metal is that you have that is backing it. And so if you eliminate that standard, you're then free to print as much paper money as you want with the full faith and backing of the United States, whatever that means, and you can print money. The problem is inflation is caused predominantly by the money supply. And so inflation, the reason you have inflation is because you've got more dollars in the market chasing after the same number of goods, or in relationship to the number of goods, you've got more dollars than you had before. And so just like if you and I only have $1 and we go to the store and we each want to buy an ice cream cone, the price of that ice cream cone is probably going to be in relationship to how much money you and I have in our pocket to bid on it.
It's not just that, though, Glenn. Let me add another big factor. Interest rates have a big factor. For example, when interest rates are very high, it costs a lot of money to buy stuff. So if you want to buy a house, if you want to buy a car, if it costs a whole lot of money, to 20% interest rates, then you're less likely. Look, if you've ever bought a car or house, you know I can spend X amount per month. And so you figure interest rates are this, then if I can borrow up to this amount for the house or for the car after I put my points down on the house, and then I can get $200,000 worth of house. or 100,000 or whatever. In 2005, I'm a cocktail waitress and I can get a $500,000 house, no problem, and I don't owe anything for 6 years. Anyway, I digress. But then that would keep, if interest rates are high, that keeps inflation low because nobody can buy anything. But then if you, if they're trying to, if they lower interest rates, if the economy's down, then it's really easy. Then more people will buy a house, buy a car, rent something, whatever. Then money, it gets easier. So there are other effects. And just generally, if it's good times, if things are going well, then everyone's buying and people can charge more and you can spend it. Whereas now, you don't see a lot of inflation except in food and things because they've been holding off because they haven't passed, with the exception of Netflix, they haven't passed the cost along for a lot of commodities. And so inflation has been kept artificially low, I would say. It's not just about Zimbabwe, it's not just printing money.
Well, if you look at, I think Keynesians might disagree about the money supply being the fundamental cause of inflation. But if you look at the Austrian School of Economics, if you look at Hayek and his stuff, and I think you can make a very simple argument that's, although simple, it is basically correct in that overall, and that's why sometimes it helps to simplify it, overall the money supply is determinant of prices. The money supply versus the supply of goods and services will determine what the prices are. Now, you can have inflation, inflation can have an impact, but you also have to realize that the inflation rate is a product of or a result of the other factors in the market, which include the money supply. And within the overall economy, whether there's overall inflation or not, you can have some prices going up and some prices going down, which can be affected by interest rates. But interest rates themselves are a product of or a result of the money supply.
And the best example of that is, in fact, Zimbabwe. I was being flippant earlier, but Frank Wolf, a congressman in Northern Virginia, is known. He carries two things on him. He doesn't carry a phone because his aide, Dan Scanlon, always walks around with like 2 or 3 phones. But he has a copy of the U.S. Constitution in his pocket, and he has, I think it's like a $10 trillion Zimbabwe banknote, which you can buy on eBay for, I don't know, a quarter probably. It's some high denomination, and that's the point he makes, that if you keep printing money, then, you will have inflation. So what do you guys think? Go ahead. I just wanted to move on to, because we're got about 10 more minutes. I wanted to move on to the debt ceiling.
Real quick, if you want to read a book that will give you a little bit of a perspective on this economic issue. It doesn't deal specifically, I think, with the gold standard, but it's Meltdown by, I think, Thomas Woods. That's all I was going to say.
Emily, do you have a favorite book on inflation?
I don't. And I haven't even read Freakonomics, which I've heard is an excellent beginner's guide to economics. And I've kind of avoided the subject like the plague, which the one thing that they told us in my master's program, and which was happening right during the beginning of the recession, was that as a journalist, you need to learn how to understand this stuff, and too many journalists don't. So I'm completely guilty of that, and I apologize.
You're like me. You know a little bit about a lot of stuff. You don't know a lot about everything. But yeah, and this is, I was joking when I said that whole topic was a ratings bonanza. But okay, right, I'm in Lynchburg, Virginia, and pretty close to us is the district of Congressman Eric Cantor, who apparently, I guess there was this tiff with President Obama in their little love fest where I guess they can't stand each other. President Obama and Eric Cantor really don't like each other, especially when their sugar's running low and the meeting's in their 3rd hour or 4th hour. And I guess he stormed. There are varying accounts of this. Pretty funny. I think Eric Cantor said that he said whatever and stormed out. And depending on if you were looking at liberal or conservative, there was different perspectives. And I think the Democrats said, well, he had concluded what he was going to say and ended the meeting and left the room, and what's the big deal? So, and then I guess they were going to go to Camp David, and then Speaker Boehner's not all about that. Do either of you have any thoughts on, and I'm going to get you to talk for about 2 minutes on this. Do either of you have any thoughts on this whole, if they don't reach the debt, if they don't increase the debt limit, is it going to be Armageddon? Is Joe's six-pack, who works at 7-Eleven or Walmart, or, you know, is a school teacher, are they going to see any impact from this? Or is this just going to affect people like Warren Buffett and people who have a bunch of stock? And you can argue a lot of anybody who has a pension plan owns stock, you know, maybe second or third party. But what do you guys think? Is this a mountain out of a molehill, or is this going to be, you know, like Hurricane Katrina as far as the economy? What do you all think?
Emily, please take all 2 minutes.
That's right. Well, I think that, and you know, I haven't heard much on whether or not this is actually going to be Armageddon for everyday Americans financially. But what I have heard from a number of analysts is that if you know, if there isn't an agreement reached, that it could possibly be Armageddon for the Republicans' chances, the Republican Party's chances come the presidential election. That, you know, this could be, if they're unable to make a compromise, it could be the ultimate sign of them dragging their feet just too much, of saying no too many times. So it's interesting, and I think that President Obama, as far as the talks have gone, I think that his stance and, you know, really trying to play the hard mediator between the two parties, I think that he's done a fairly good job. It's always unfortunate to hear reports of people storming off or leaving negotiations, because as politicians, that's really your main job, is to be able to negotiate and to come to compromises. And, you know, our political system is built on compromises. So I'd like to see something reached. How about you, Glenn?
Sure, I'd like to see something reached, too. You know, I haven't been following it that closely. And, you know, I would like them to reach some sort of agreement. I don't want to see, you know, this, you know, I guess, come to a halt. The negotiations come to a halt. You know, I think she's right. It's going to be bad for the Republicans. It seems like it usually is bad for the Republicans when something like this happens. But I haven't been following it that closely.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, if you were to put a reason on why it's bad for the Republicans, I mean, if anything, they're, by being so hardline on this, they're taking too much of an academic approach to it. Although you could also probably argue they're taking too much of a political approach to it, in the way that they're trying to please, you know, some very hard right groups of voters. But that's the ticket. That's the ticket. That's the thing. See, you have the Democrats who are, you know, trying to protect President Barack Obama's signature issue, that the health care plan. And as I've said before, the spending has gone from 2 under Clinton, 3 under Bush, 4 under Obama, and they're trying to, you know, preserve the programs that cause the folks who vote for them to vote for them. And the Republicans have a problem. I don't know who's going to control these folks. And there's no controlling Tea Party folks. They don't even have a leader by definition. So you've got these folks who either beat a Democrat, like here, the 5th and 6th District of Virginia. 5th District, former James Madison wrote the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, his district. Both of those congressmen have signed on saying that they want in exchange for raising the debt ceiling, they want a balanced budget amendment. And there's no, you know, these Tea Party guys are not going to vote for any kind of tax increase, no matter what they negotiate. I'm not sure if the right two guys are really even in the room with the president.
because I'm not sure how Eric Cantor and John Boehner can go back to these Tea Party guys when some of these Tea Party congressmen knocked off an establishment Republican like Boehner and Cantor to get the nomination. And, they're Republicans because we all know if you're a Republican or Democrat, your chance of getting elected are much higher than if you're an independent. There are a few independent. I mean, but it's few and far between. It's not like Italy, we're a two-party system. So I don't know. This is interesting. And I got to say, if it does happen, it will finally answer my question because I really don't know if, what will happen. I saw Michelle Bachmann talk, and others saying that why don't they just pay, cut other things and pay the interest on the debt? Why does that have to be the first thing cut? And then other folks are saying that really this is unconstitutional, that Congress would be able to tell the executive what they can spend, that's a breach of the separation of powers. So it's I don't know, and I think both sides are blowing a little bit of smoke and throwing a little urine samples at each other and all that stuff. But and this stuff storming out of a meeting, it just and Glenn, I don't know. I've seen periods where President Obama looked like the person trying to reach a consensus, the adult, and then I've seen other cases where they were like, he just doesn't get it. We want to cut spending. We can't keep spending like drunken sailors. And both parties are guilty of this. When they had everything under Bush, they spent like crazy. And I'm not just talking the wars and 9/11 stuff. They spent like crazy, straight up. And then the Democrats, it's not like you and me, where we can't just spend, and nobody ever calls and says, wait a minute, you got this credit card bill. And folks are, China's going to take over and stuff. The only reason China has any money is because the United States builds everything there. Everything on my table is built in China. So they don't want us to go out of business. We're their customer. So everyone will be impacted. It still is true, despite what people say. The U.S. is going down. When the U.S. Sneezes, the earth shakes. Economically, that's still the case, and it'll be a long time before that's not the case, unless we have Armageddon as predicted. If we don't do this, but I hope that we should pay our bills. And we should also reduce spending, and we should move toward a balanced budget amendment. But just saying that, the devil's in the details, what does that mean? If we're in a war, you can't spend and go into debt? Because this is the worst debt. If you look at the charts, if you Google the deficit or the national debt as a percentage of GDP, the gross domestic product, you will discover that it's the biggest it's been, with the exception of World War II, when we just everything throw the kitchen sink, whatever it takes, and that it's the worst now it's been since World War II. Of course, we had 9/11, we had 2 wars, 6 years of nonstop war. Now going, then we elected Obama, and now everyone gets insurance. So, and I'm not saying that was too simplistic. We had a guy. A buddy of mine who's in Vancouver, and he was talking about Canada's healthcare system, and he pays like $30 or something. And I'm not sure what the taxes are in Canada, but I know that their economy is doing a lot better than ours is, and everybody's insured. And everyone pays a little bit, except if you're in school or if you're elderly or disabled or something like that. And he says the health. I said, is it really? Is it 6 months for a toothache to get tooth to get pulled? And he's like, no. And he said that he had some weird disease that they hadn't encountered before, and they flew in 6 doctors to look at it, and he pays $30 a month. So that was a sample of one. Obviously not scientific, but very interesting. I thought.
Fundamental economics. Somebody's paying for it.
Correct, and you're paying for it anyway, right? That it's easy to say, it's a bunch of deadbeats, and we're all gonna, illegal immigrants, But really, if you want to talk in those terms, if you have insurance, you're paying for the 2 people before you in the ER who didn't have insurance. And then there is some argument to the fact that they use the emergency room because if you're dirt poor, right? If you're a minimum wage earner, what are they going to go after? And so they're just going to treat you, and then you wait till then you wait until, like, you and I were both working in radio in the 80s. We were kids. You were just out of college. Neither one of us had any health insurance.
I was in college.
You were in college, so maybe you did. But I was just starting out. I didn't have health insurance.
I didn't have insurance.
Yeah, so if we had, we were young though, and the whole thing, and Emily, if you want to jump in, just step on me. But the whole thing, if the whole argument, and the whole the forcing people to get it is required if you're going to say pre-existing conditions can't be an exclusion. It's just like you can't have a car accident and then call Geico and say, I'd like car insurance. I've just had an accident. Yeah. And then after it's paid for, dump the insurance. That if you're going to say they have to cover your kid with leukemia, then you have to say everyone has to have insurance. Because it just, and that's a conservative idea that the Heritage Foundation originally supported, because they're paying for it anyway by higher premiums to pay for the people who don't, who use the emergency room as a doctor's office, because they wait until stuff gets so bad that ER has to treat them, and then it's more expensive anyway. At least that's the theory. I'm not a medical expert. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, and well, I wanted to add just a little bit of personal background on this. I actually was a member of, I guess you could call it Romney Care, of the Massachusetts mandated health care for about a year, and experienced how their different measures, I mean, granted, there are tons of flaws in their system, and it was a lower standard of health insurance than I was used to growing up under my parents' insurance. But one thing that it was very good at was taking people who, would use the emergency room for a sneeze or a cough and making them go different places. I mean, they actually mandate that you set up with a primary care physician within the first month of going on the insurance, and they, limit the physicians you can go to based on like walking distance around your home, and there is something to be said for making people get insurance.
Do you think he's full of crap now that he's disowning his plan? Do you think that you find that? Now he's all against it.
Frustrating. I do find it really frustrating. It's very flip-floppy, and it reminds me of what McCain did coming into the 2008 election, the way he flip-flopped on a lot of the bipartisan work he had done. So I'm not sure if it's his best tactic.
Boy, that was a disaster. That was a bad campaign. That was I mean, I know it was like rough going for any Republican after 6 years of nonstop war and Katrina and all this stuff, and it was a tough road to hoe. But the whole, suspending his campaign because, and Obama is like, well, I can chew gum and walk. And then, I mean, it was just awful. I mean, it's amazing. And Obama was just such a great campaign. I mean, I've never seen anybody who, the alleged, or I guess the terrorist guy who was allegedly his friend and ex-terrorist, and the constant beating on
Bill Ayers.
Bill Ayers and Reverend Jeremiah Wright, the constant, and he just, I've never seen a candidate as good, and it's just like McCain just just fell apart. It just was a disaster, in my humble opinion. I mean, it was, and I've seen a lot of them. I've seen good ones and bad ones, and my goodness. Any final thoughts? We probably should wrap. Go ahead, Emily.
McCain is really old. In his defense. Sorry, that's my only defense for him. He's really old, and that's probably the only excuse for how terribly he did on sticking by issues in his campaign.
I think that's what Sarah Palin really was, in fact, an issue, because and often it doesn't matter. I mean, I think the first Bush proved that your vice presidential nominee really doesn't matter, but it really mattered because at his age there was a good shot that the vice president would take over. And even Bill O'Reilly, who is an admirer and has her on his show, said, he didn't think she was ready. I don't think she was ready to have nuclear codes. I just don't. I think she's an intelligent person. I think her heart's in the right place. I think she's a great mom. I think she may have been a terrific Alaska governor. and but I don't think she had the gravitas and the knowledge of the world, the sophisticated knowledge of the world. One would hope, not that an intellectual would make a great a president, but I think it was just like plucking some rookie. You know, not everybody can be a Lincoln and be, you know, a congressman and make a great president.
Yeah, it did come out of left field, didn't it?
Yeah, he wanted something to shake up the campaign. It did. She became the focus of it, and she's a rock star, you know.
Yeah. He misjudged, or his handlers misjudged it.
At least she's a rock star like Ken Cuccinelli is in Virginia. He could probably raise a lot of money, you know, traveling around the country because he's just, you know, this fearless conservative guy, not afraid to make waves. And a disclaimer, I you know, I knew him before, or he provided some legal advice for us. But yeah, he's a good guy. He's a rock star. And these guys, it's just, I don't know. I think Sarah Palin's a good person. I don't think at that point she was ready. She may be ready. I don't know. Any predictions on whether she's going to run? You think Sarah Palin's going to enter the race, Emily?
Oh, I think time is ticking on her at this point if she's going to. You know, I think she probably will. I'm not sure what this last-minute tactic is, except for maybe that she is trying to go for the shaking it up, like how it was when she got named vice presidential candidate. But my prediction would be yes, she will eventually step her dainty feet into the race.
Glenn, what do you think?
I like her, but I hope she doesn't. I don't think it's right for her in 2012. I hope she doesn't, but, you know, the way I've seen her decide on some things, I think Emily's probably right. She probably will, but I hope not. Not this time.
If the election were held today, I think she will not run. I think she's campaigning for influence and to, you know, she likes it. I mean, she was an obscure Alaska governor. I mean, I'm a political junkie, and I didn't know anything about her. I even knew who Dan Quayle was before he was picked, and in fact, I predicted that he was going to get picked. But I had no idea. I mean, I didn't know who Sarah Palin was, and I you know, she's got her book and the TV show and her daughter's TV show and book and on, and I think, you know, she's doing her tour. Good for her. She's exercising her First Amendment freedoms, as written into law by former 5th District Congressman James Madison. And good for her, but I think Emily's got the key phrase. The clock is ticking, and I don't know. We'll see. No, I'm not excited about any of the Republican candidates, or at least any of the top tier that have a chance. What do you guys think? Does anybody like Ron Paul? I don't think he's going to win the nomination, but I love when he's in a debate. I love listening to him. I could listen to him for hours. Anything on YouTube, I love watching him. What do you guys think? Anybody? Maybe we need that guy from New York. You know, the rent's too damn high or something to shake it up. What do you guys think? Emily, are you excited, or Glenn? Anybody grab you on the Republican side?
You know, I don't. No one is really. I mean, I think that Romney could have a chance just because I know that he's very strong politically. But I think the biggest problem that the Republican Party has right now is that their voter base is very segmented and in weird numbers too. So, like, the Tea Party vote is obviously very important, but at the same time, it's not enough to win an entire presidential election. So they're having this problem where they need to appeal to a vast array of people, and it's hard to do that when you have one group that, I mean, to get the Tea Party vote, there's a very strict line of things that you need to do. So it's tricky. It's tricky for them, and it should be interesting to see how it plays out.
I think I haven't been following it. I'm kind of waiting for it to thin out, the field to thin out, so I don't get too excited right now. But you know, I kind of like Mitt Romney, not so much because I agree with him on every single point, but I like him because I think he's probably the one or maybe two candidates that has a chance at beating Obama.
What about his, you know, sticking to his guns and defending his Massachusetts healthcare plan?
About not doing it?
Well, I was being a little facetious.
Well, I couldn't see you there, so I didn't see your expression, Dan. No, that doesn't bother me. You know, that doesn't bother me. That
Okay.
he's, if he flip flops, or if he did it for expediency's sake at one point, or that doesn't really bother me.
Okay.
Not at this point.
All right. Well, Glenn, can I say what you do, or do you want to tell us what you do? Because I think on another show I want to get you to talk about that. That's interesting. Are we allowed to say that?
I work in law enforcement at a dispatch 911 communications center.
And I think
Out
that would
west.
be fascinating to.
Out in the Wild West.
I bet you
Out
got
in the
some
wild,
stories to
liberal
tell.
I do, but I can't really, talk too much about that because, some of it's, privacy issues and stuff like that. So I don't want to get too much into details on that. I thought we might talk about Google, but the show's over, isn't it?
Go ahead. We can talk real quick. Emily, you
we
cool?
can talk about some other time.
I'm trying to pull up. Actually, we got 30 seconds or a minute because I'm trying to pull a picture up of the paper to brag about Emily's handiwork here.
The Lynchburg Times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. You were rushing off to the printer. So is it out on the newsstands now?
It is, and I'm pulling it up
Okay.
right now. I've got you on the screen, but I'm trying to pull up a picture of the thing. So give me
Put
one
Emily
sec.
up. Put Emily's
What?
picture up, not mine.
No, I'm going to put a picture of the newspaper. What do you think about what are we going to say about Google?
Well, I tried to call you on Google. I think it was Google Voice, and it just kept ringing and ringing. So finally, after about 3 or 4 times, I hung up and I called on my VoIP phone here on my cable VoIP phone, and it got right through. So maybe there's some reason that Google Voice won't accept Google Voice calls at your talk show.
I would think that would be odd, right?
Yeah. I've never used Google Voice before. This is the first time, but it seemed to be working okay. I dialed the number and it rang, but it just kept ringing and ringing.
Yeah, and let me just remind folks what you can do. You can call our number, 818-688-6625. It's the same number for every show, except I think last night or the night before I put the wrong number up. And I actually had a caller tell the screener that wrong number's up. But you can call and you can just listen to the show, and then if you want to join in, you press 1, and it puts you to the screener, and you can vent or agree or whatever. But so we'll get on another show. We're going to get Glenn to tell us his favorite interesting 911 call stories, and Emily, of course, Emily Williams, the lovely talented, is the senior political writer for the Lynchburg Times. It's a free newspaper in the Lynchburg area, 35,000 readers. The new issue is up, and that's why there was no show last night, because I was putting that together. And you can look at that. All the issues in their entirety are at lynchburgtimes.com. Lynchburgtimes.com. You can check them out for free. So to Glenn Williams. My goodness. Sing us a song, Glenn. Yeah. Glenn, thank you so much. I appreciate you calling in. You're terrific. And anyone's welcome to call us during the show. You can agree, disagree, change the subject. Just participate. Make your voice heard. Exercise your
You
First
both
Amendment
were so
freedoms.
nice to me. This is the first time I've ever called a talk show like this, and you were both so nice to me, despite probably many ignorant statements I may have made. So anybody
No, you were
can call in.
great.
You don't have to be an expert.
Now I was trying to, any moron can. No, I'm kidding. No, Glenn, I was telling him.
Yeah,
see, I was
there you
talking
go,
to.
see?
Yeah. No, I said,
why don't
Glenn.
you call in just to show that any moron can get on the show.
Yeah. No, I said, Glenn. I said, you're terrific, because he's a radio guy. He's got this smooth voice, right? I'm Glenn
I tried
Connolly.
to tell some stories about you from long ago, and you said, "Okay, fine."
Yeah. So I said, he said, I don't really have anything to say, and of course, he could talk for 6
Hey, Emily?
hours.
Emily, what kind of a boss is Dan?
Oh.
He's
You,
great.
maybe you better tell me later.
Dan's fantastic. Oh dear. Well, I'm not as good a boss or supervisor or editor, publisher, whatever as she is a writer. She's immensely more qualified than I am. She's got a master's degree in journalism. I just play publisher by day.
You make her go to council meetings and stuff, and actually sit through the whole meeting.
Yeah, you can watch her on you can watch her on streaming, right? You're on TV in the back.
every Tuesday.
You and the nice
every
young
Tuesday,
lady
either
from
16 or 17.
Yeah, if you look,
she is like a real news person, because very few, from what I see, very few news organizations actually have people do that kind of stuff anymore. Maybe in newspaper, but certainly not in radio.
oh, she's
It's rip
good.
and read at best. It's
Yeah, you
rip
can-
and read at best. Just
You can watch her. Yeah, if you tune in, I think is it live on the internet, right, Emily?
Yeah,
The
they
meetings?
they keep every single council meeting I've ever been at is still up video-wise on the internet. So
your
there's
European,
fans out there that want to watch.
yeah, her
Europe
Euro,
in the background.
yeah, just a quick alert to Emily's European stalkers. You can check her out for hours at a time. If you sift through a 3-hour council meeting, and every so often they'll when the camera's angle's just right, you'll see Emily.
Has her phone been hacked by Rupert Murdoch?
Well, it's still under investigation, so we can't talk about it. But I'm sure you understand how that works. Glenn Connolly from Washington State, we thank you for calling. It's 6:20 p.m. over there, post meridian, and Emily from Lynchburg, Virginia, the greater Lynchburg metropolitan area. And thank you thanks to your wonderful 52-pound dog for allowing us to have an hour and 20 minutes of your time. And folks, thank you for watching and listening. We're on iTunes. If you just look for McDermott Report in the iTunes store, we're on YouTube. If you could just find me, the thing on the screen, g+.2/McDermott. That's my Google Plus profile. And if you don't remember that, just go to Google Plus, put in McDermott Report or Dan McDermott, and look for me on the set here, and you'll see links to our archived and our live stream. Anyway, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Great show. We solved all the problems and only upset the Ron Paul fans.
Good night, Dan. Good night, Emily.
Thank you.
All
right. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. All right, guys. Thank you. Have a great time. I'm Dan McDermott signing out for the McDermott Report.